Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our conversation today about ensuring the safety of Michigan's elections. I'm Will Roberts. I'm the Managing Director for Democracy and Government Reform at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. And I want to thank our partners, the Democratic Governors Association, as well as the Democratic mayors for making this event happen today. And thank our fantastic panelists that I'll introduce in just a second. As a programming note, I note that live captioning is available and enabled. It can be enabled rather by clicking the closed caption tab at the bottom of your screen. Also, we'll be taking questions toward the end of the conversation, so please feel free to start submitting those now using the questions tab. With the November election just a couple of weeks away, state and local leaders around the country and certainly in Michigan are taking decisive action to ensure that every person can vote safely during the pandemic. And with high turnout expected and a record number of voters planning to cast their votes by mail, it's never been more important for state and local elected officials to work together to facilitate voter registration and participation, recruit and retain poll workers, and promote voter education. And we're going to talk about all of that this afternoon with our very distinguished panel. We have Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Governor, good to see you. Mayor Deidre Waterman of Pontiac, Michigan. Great to see you. And Mayor Bill Wild of Westland. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And we'll just dive right in. The first question is for all of you, but certainly deference to you, Governor. We're happy to start with you. We know that our election this November faces innumerable challenges, as we talked about, ensuring that everyone can register and have ready access to the ballot, that they have access to absentee ballots and that those are processed, et cetera. And so there's also the issue of making sure that we have enough poll workers to make sure that we can keep polling places open, particularly in communities that we expect lots of turnout in person. And so wondering if we could start by talking about what steps the state is taking, and mayors, what steps you're taking at the local levels to make sure that we can sort of fill some of those gaps.
Well, sure. Thanks, Will. Glad to jump in. And I'm so glad to be joined by Mayor Bill Wild and Mayor Deidre Waterman. Feel very fortunate to have partners like these two phenomenal mayors who have helped inform a lot of the work that we do. And we work very closely together. So glad to be here with all of you as well. So one of the things that we know is in the midst of this global pandemic, it's going to be a challenge to make sure that all votes get cast and counted. One of the things that we did in Michigan in 2018, aside from electing me winning my election, we also elected a new Secretary of State who really is a leader in election policy. We elected a new Attorney General who has been a fierce advocate for voting rights. And we amended our state constitution to permit at-home voting, which we had no idea how important a tool that would be, of course. We had no idea we would be in the midst of a global pandemic and have to run a presidential election in a state that will determine probably the next president of the United States. So the whole world is going to focus on Michigan. But we created this tool. We amended our constitution and made it easier. It used to be that you would have to sign an affidavit to get a absentee ballot to vote from home and attest to the fact that you weren't going to be in town. But now we make it easy. You can go online and request your absentee ballot. Starting today, people can walk in person and go into their clerk's office. We want to make sure they have a mask, but you can go in and vote now. And those are two important efforts of ours to ensure that we don't have a crush of people in the midst of a global pandemic on election day. And that we also sidestep, I think, some of the efforts that are working to undermine our confidence in our election, to create barriers to people. I'm growing increasingly concerned about the rhetoric coming out of the White House. I'm growing increasingly concerned of what we see in terms of activity from self-anointed people that are showing up and I think using ways to intimidate others. And so this partnership between my office and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General our local leaders like the mayors on this Zoom conversation, and is going to be crucial to making sure that in this historic election where we expect a huge turnout, that we get people to vote safely well before Election Day. And that's the work that we're doing.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Mayor Waterman or Wild, any additional thoughts on what y'all are doing locally in your cities? It's great to hear the fantastic partnership between state and local, though.
Mayor Waterman, you want to go first?
There I am. Now you can hear me. So it's great to be on the panel with you, Mayor Wild, as well as Governor. Always great for your leadership, and congratulations on getting the budget passed with the legislature. That's a great move in this, as we're all affected economically by this pandemic, which is upon us and has offered additional challenges for this election. So yes, as we are aware of the challenges, the natural ones from the pandemic, as well as the other ones that we've mentioned for accessibility and for, we need to remember that we had to prepare and we had to get all hands on board in terms of city government proceeding. I told every facet of our government, including the clerk's office, as well as all the supporting facets are here to make sure that this most important election is carried off with all the things you've mentioned, Governor. Accessibility, because we know about the problems with the United States Postal Service. We in Pontiac received a notice that to allow up to 15 days for absentee ballots to get to the clerk's office. So we've got a huge program of education going on of reaching out to our population to educate them about this importance of, if you're going to vote absentee, and we're encouraging people to use that state constitutionally provided option for them to vote and to be counted, but to do that with safety in terms of how they can get their ballots to the clerk's office so it can be counted and not caught up with any delays because of the particular challenges of the United States postal system. So it's preparation, it's education, it's accessibility to make sure that people don't have to wait in long lines and that they utilize this absentee voter option, as well as are not intimidated or scared away or skeptical by some of this rhetoric and some of the other suppression tactics that are going on. So those are some of the things that we're doing in Pontiac. And as I said, it's all hands on board, for this is a very important election for us.
Fantastic. Mayor Wall.
Well, and good afternoon, Governor. Thanks for being with us here today. And as Mayor Waterman said, thank you for the budget, which looks like it was kind towards local government. So we do appreciate that. You know, as Mayor Waterman said, it really is all hands on deck. And you know, some of the things that are interesting at the local level is that we're all struggling for poll workers. And one of the things that we found is that communities are kind of stealing each other's poll workers. So in Westland, we never really had a real big problem with poll workers because we had a pretty good system. But working with our city council, we've had to up the pay that we're offering, and our poll workers now are averaging about $20 an hour. And we had to do that to be competitive. So our poll workers didn't go to our surrounding communities. So we've really had to stretch our budget for election workers. And talking with our clerk yesterday, and Westland's a little bit unique. We have an elected clerk. So there's a lot of independence in that office. But working with our clerk, we found out yesterday that he needs at least 30 workers still, but he could use 100. So we're offering up our city employees through our collective bargaining agreements. City Hall is actually closed on Election Day as a holiday. So we're actually able to utilize a lot of city employees, and as we try to fill the ranks, we may even use some department heads. We've reached out to our local Chamber of Commerce to see if we can tap into some of the businesses in town and actually tap into their workforce as well. We've added drop boxes. So we're kind of doing all those things to try to make the process as smooth as possible. And Just to put it in a little bit of perspective, so Westland has 85,000 residents. We've typically have had 50,000 registered voters. That's up over 60,000 now. Just 4 years ago, we only had 4,500 residents on the permanent absentee voter list. After the November election, that number will have reached about 25,000. So about half of our, almost half of our residents now will be voting permanent absentees. So that's definitely changed the way that we do business, and moving forward, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but we're trying to learn as we go and learn from our peers as well.
Well, thank you all. That's fantastic information to see this discussion. One, it's fantastic that it sounds like you all, largely because of just being reform minded, ended up being a little bit ahead of the ball in some respects when we were all hit with the pandemic. I'm wondering, Mayor Wild, since you got us talking about some of the intricacies of what it takes to recruit poll workers, and also we had a conversation about how to make sure we're doing these things equitably and reaching out across as broad coalitions as possible. Fantastic to hear about the integration with city workers. I know there's some other news I know out of Detroit and a similar vein, and CAP at the CAP Action, we've been doing some work in that regard to try to promote the ways that individuals and all kinds of stakeholders down from schools and colleges and businesses, the business community, the religious community can be doing to work with governments to recruit poll workers. And so I'm wondering, since you mentioned the chamber, and this is for all of you, sort of what kind of partnerships are you all forming, whether it be with the public sector, private sector, whether those be partnerships that you were planning to form, or if they're sort of strange bedfellow partnerships. What kind of partnerships have you all been forming with different sectors to try to fill in some of those gaps like you were speaking to? And I guess that counts also, but a question for what kind of sort of engagement or increased partnership is there between state and local? I know there are lots of folks on the call from all around the country, certainly a lot of folks from Michigan, because y'all are popular, but for sort of best practices that you can try to export out to places, what are things going on in Michigan that you think are working to get everybody singing from the same songbook?
One of the things we've done in Pontiac is in recruiting poll workers, because, and I think we're all affected by the same thing with the pandemic, which has disproportionately affected older age citizens, who are often the retirees who are often the ones who have supplied our poll workers for so many years, and traditionally have been at the polls year after year. So some of them are reticent to have that exposure and being at polls. So we've had to not only recruit more people because of that lack of that reticence of that age group, but also because we just need a lot more people at the polls. So we've reached out to a lot of our participant organizations, social service organizations, other civic organizations, and said, help us recruit. And they have lent people who are going to be poll workers. And so we have reached out across broad categories to get additional workers, to get as many as we need. Not only that, it's important to train them so that they'll be adaptable at the polls. And we have done that. Our senior centers, which have been closed for the pandemic, we have opened up just so we can train our poll workers, and that's going to be going on with a lot of intensity. It's already started, and it's going to be going on for the next couple of weeks as we get the newer poll workers fully trained so they're able to be adept and able to handle these situations at the various polls. So we've done that through partnerships with a lot of the organizations. I'm so proud to say that so many people have stepped up from organizations across the spectrum in Pontiac, who have heard the call that we want to make sure that we have accessibility for this election, as well as awareness and education. That's so important. We thank the state government, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General for all the accommodations that you have made to make this election more accessible for people. And we just want to make sure that people are aware of those accommodations that are available for them. And so we're going to make a massive education effort out there. And we've learned some of the tricks of doing that by the censuses. That's winding down. We also had to conduct the census with the challenges of a pandemic. So we're going to take some of those ways we have found it novel to get the messaging out to people and turn that into the elections and use that too to have a massive awareness and have people know about these opportunities and the other ways that we can surmount the challenges. So that's going on as we speak here in Pontiac.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Governor, go ahead, Mayor. Then Governor, I wonder any lessons learned about the sort of state-local partnerships that we can export out? But go ahead, Mayor.
Before you go to the governor, earlier when I said that our clerk said that we needed 30 workers, but he would take 100. We need 30 workers just to reach the state mandated minimum to cover our polls. When we said that we needed 100, one of the things that we learned during the primary was that we had poll workers that were lined up to work. We trained them, they committed to it, and then on election day, because of some concerns with COVID and safety, they just didn't show up. So what we're having to do is we have to basically overhire just so that we have the ability to move people around on that day. And so one of the things that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to actually steal an idea I heard Mayor Duggan from Detroit talk about yesterday. Was he said that he spent a lot of time over the last couple of days is actually calling CEOs of companies in Detroit and asking them to consider giving some of their folks time off to do some community service and do this election work. He said that every business that he called took him up on that offer. So we're going to try to emulate some of that here in the city of West End. And we're working with that chamber, and I plan on making some of those calls myself later today.
Fantastic.
Great idea, Mayor Wild. And also I might submit, I've looked within my own city halls. I've actually given my city hall staff the day off with provision that they will spend at least 5 hours helping us with the polls or handling absentee voting, ballots pickup.
Well, and I commend that local leadership. I mean, we're seeing I believe that Mayor Duggan's doing this similarly in Detroit as well, Mayor Waterman. So I think that, we in Michigan are practical. We're watching one another. We're not afraid to steal each other's good ideas. And we're kind enough to actually give one another credit when we do that. So that's good. One of the things that I would share as well is that, the whole world knows that there are a handful of states that there's going to be an incredible amount of pressure on, that there's going to be an incredible amount of debate around, lots of lawsuits, lots of concerns. And so we're grateful that we've got other states that have offered to come to our assistance. For instance, I know that Dana Nessel, our Attorney General, has gotten help from other attorneys general to pitch in and help with some of the legal challenges that we're anticipating. Not that they will take them on, but to be there as a form of assistance, I think is really important. And I'm hopeful and confident that we will see more of that happening as the world descends on the state. We also recognize that state employees who have bargained for election day off, we are hopeful and encouraging that they too will take part in being poll workers. My child, who is 16, has signed up, and she's going to be trained as a poll worker in another couple of days when that training happens. And so we're encouraging people young and able, as well as people who get the day off, people who are available, and whether it's businesses that add their effort. It's on all of us, and that's the nonpartisan part of why it's so important that we're all pitching in and making this election work, because we want to get a result that counts every vote and that we can all have confidence in, and that is as quick as possible. And by quick, I'm thinking days, hopefully day, but we recognize that we just had a legal case. A determination came down that says that ballots that are received after election day but postmarked prior to election day will be counted. We're hopeful that we don't have a lot of them. We'd like to get people to mail those in quickly, and they're available now. But that is something that we're all mindful of, that is, I think, will have an impact on this election too.
Absolutely. And Governor, I wanted to ask you, you brought this up in a couple of different ways in what you just said, but this is supposed to be the talking about voting and participating in our democracy should be a nonpartisan exercise. But as you mentioned, there's lots of pressure on states like Michigan, both coming through litigation in the courts. There's also just, sort of pressure forecasted from many on the right. We know that although we're dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, that we have also been fighting voter suppression and the ramp up to that in this election cycle. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering what your thoughts are, both as you look at the landscape and prepare, Michiganders to participate, to feel, comfortable in doing so. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about where we are sort of in this conversation about our elections, and why, for some reason, there are folks who would rather utilize COVID-19 as a tool of voter suppression than helping everybody vote.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the sad truth is that in this environment, in this moment, there are political agendas at play to undermine some of the democratic traditions that we as a nation have always had available to us. And there's a rather long but important article that was published in The Atlantic. I read it yesterday. I think it came out yesterday, but that really walks through the states that are going to be targeted in this way. And there's no coincidence that these efforts to undermine our U.S. Postal Service, the efforts to already call into doubt the outcome of an election that hasn't even happened yet, to question whether or not there would be a peaceful transfer of power. These are all designed to undermine our election. And it's never happened in our country like this. It is sinister, and it is selfish, and it is incredibly destructive. And that's why it's so important that we public servants, who we serve everyone, we run on one side of the ballot or another, but once we take our oaths, we take those oaths and represent everyone in our jurisdictions. We got to get this election right. We got to make it easier for people to vote. This pandemic doesn't care if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. It doesn't care if you're a Buckeye or a Wolverine. It doesn't care which part of Michigan you live in. If you're a Youper, which you've got two peninsulas, I know people forget this is Youpers, and they call us trolls because we live below the bridge. But it doesn't matter what part of the state you are in. You have a right as an American to an American government that is going to protect you in the midst of a pandemic, and a government that ensures that your vote, you can cast it safely and that it will be counted. And that's what we are going to live up to. But there are going to be, no question, many challenges to this, intimidation tactics. And that's precisely why, we're working so hard to make sure that people know today is the first day of many before the election that you can walk into a clerk's office and cast your ballot. Today is a day you can go online and request that ballot be sent to you if you'd prefer to do that. But you can drop it off in one of Mayor Wild's drop boxes. Today is a day where if you fill that ballot out now and you get it in the mail, you can mail it to the clerk in Pontiac, in Oakland County, Michigan, to make sure that it gets counted. But if you're worried that the Postal Service doesn't have the bandwidth to get it there on time because of these efforts to undermine it coming out of the White House, you can drop that ballot off too. And so there are a lot of ways for people to vote, and to vote safely in the midst of this pandemic. But the earlier people vote, I believe, the better. What we all want to avoid is a last minute crush on election day, where a lot of people are trying to get into one space, where there may be organized efforts to intimidate voters. We can avoid that from happening if we avail ourselves of these other tools now and in the next 5 weeks.
No, fantastic. And I think you answered you sort of answered the corollary to my question, which was going to be, you mentioned intimidation like we've never seen, and particularly the connection between voter intimidation, where it seems like there's sort of encouragement coming from the White House, to put it mildly as possible. You know, so you talked about sort of the practical advice, which is critical for people, you know, to have their voting plan, have it now, do it early. You know, but you know, for those folks who might be concerned about what they would face on election day from folks, some of whom might be visibly armed, let's be frank, who want to show up and try to scare people from voting across Michigan. You know, what advice can you give to people? I know there are lots of people. Again, as I said, we have, you know, 100+ people from around the country, different states, some of whom are going to be facing the same thing. And as you said, states like Michigan or states like my home state of Pennsylvania, I'm from Philly originally, are going to be feeling particular pressure from some of these groups. So I'm wondering what advice we can give to people.
Well, you know, Will, we've seen it directly. We've seen it here in Michigan, and the whole world saw the pictures of what happened in Michigan.
Yeah.
You know, this president, as soon as he set his sights on me, the whole dynamic here on the ground changed. I have a Republican legislature that stopped working with me, wouldn't extend my state of emergency. Not only that, but we've been locked in a court battle. They're trying to take away my powers. Now they're running an effort to have a ballot initiative to take away the very emergency powers that I've used to save thousands of lives. And our economy is one of the top 10 in the country right now because of the work that we did. And all of that is in jeopardy because Donald Trump set his sights on me. In that same period of time, we saw people show up in the Michigan Capitol with AR-15s and AK-47s and automatic rifles, and people outside with swastikas and Confederate flags and hanging my likeness from a noose. That happened because one man decided to set his sights on this state, and it encouraged all of this activity to intimidate me, to intimidate legislators when they were at the Capitol. And that's precisely what I think we all have to be mindful of that could happen as we get closer to this election. That Atlantic article, I think it should sober every one of us who wants to just ensure we've got a safe, valid election. And let's be clear, voting absentee is inherently valid and has incredible integrity. The studies that have been done over the many cycles and so many votes that have been cast absentee show that they are not uniquely susceptible. But you wouldn't know that if you listened to just this White House. And that's why I think making use of the tools to cast that vote well in advance of Election Day is something that should be a priority for every one of us. And I'm grateful we have that ability here in Michigan. I know that not every state has that, and that's why we're taking our efforts so seriously to ensure our residents safely use that tool that is available.
Fantastic. Thank you, Governor. A programming note, just reminding the folks that are watching this conversation and eager to participate to share your questions in the chat. We've been getting some of those in, and we're teeing them up, so we haven't forgotten about you for sure. Fantastic conversation thus far, and really appreciate both the technical advice, but also the sort of situational advice that people might be hearing from you all that they can replicate back home. You mentioned a lot of the litigation happening, and folks have a couple of questions that come through the chat so far, but folks are wondering about lawyers groups that are being organized to potentially staff the polls in Michigan or help people vote safely and without intimidation, and I imagine also to help with some of the legal battles that might ensue. Is there any information about that? Is the state sort of hearing from groups of folks signing up ready to defend democracy?
So our Attorney General is, I think, working in conjunctions with a lot of other attorneys general who are lending some support. But I do think that if people want to get involved, going to the one campaign at the Michigan Democratic Party is a really important way to utilize your legal skills in a way that protects democracy. And that's a place where you can go to find a lot more information. We'd welcome the help.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And Mayor Wild, I've been sort of researching for this event. I came across your Compassionate City initiative, and thinking about the role of compassionate communities and how we can foster more inclusive policies and politics around the notion again of elections, that they should be nonpartisan, and that folks should feel unintimidated when they go to exercise their right to vote. But I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how your city's commitment to engaging in that compassionate cities model, how that's tied to your voter engagement and participation efforts.
Well, at this point, it's actually a very good idea. In Westland, we've kind of created an initiative called Compassionate City, and it's that kind of that one safe space that everybody can land on. That when something controversial happens in our city, that we can all take a step back and at least compassionately look at it, regardless of your party, whatever your partisanship is, or race or gender or anything else. And it's been very helpful for our community. We probably need to, between now and election day, is with some of the things that the governor had mentioned, is that probably need to utilize that initiative down the stretch to kind of use the message that we're spreading here today under that Compassionate City initiative, because at the end of the day, this message today is a nonpartisan message. And I think that, and here at City Hall and City Hall in Pontiac, we just want people to vote. We're not asking you Republican or Democrat. We want to make it easy for you, but we also want people to feel that they're not, they don't want to feel scared or, so I think that we're going to probably circle back after we talk today. And as the governor said, we're not afraid to steal good ideas. I think we're going to steal yours on this one, Will, and we'll give you credit for it for the first couple of days. I think we'll take a look at that, and we really use that Compassionate City model on our social media platforms, but also when we need to have a united voice with the administration, the city council, and other elected officials.
I got you. Fantastic. Okay, absolutely. I'll take credit up to day two. And Mayor Waterman, I wanted to turn to you because I realized that you also have a medical background, and as a physician, and I'm wondering, as we are talking about democracy, but under the context of a global pandemic, which none of us could have imagined, most of us couldn't have imagined that we would be under, except for folks who saw the intelligence and didn't read it. But I'm wondering, as we know, COVID-19 poses particular threats for Black and Brown Americans, folks in the Latinx community and the Black community. And so I'm wondering, and I know, I mentioned offhand, and I didn't mean to do it so casually, but I know, as the governor walked us through, folks are actively trying to figure out how to use this pandemic as another tool, to scare people away. And so I'm wondering, and this is a question for all of you, but your background prompted this, Mayor, what are some of the ways that government officials can partner with health professionals to counteract some of the nefarious messages that might be out there around the election? Is there, I'm wondering if there's any engagement that's gone on either at the local level or at the state level, Governor, with some of your medical professionals tied to the election?
Certainly, this pandemic has set a particular challenge for this election, not only for all of our administrations across the way, And as a health professional, I've been acutely aware of the effect of this disease on disproportionately on various parts of our population. For the African American population, the Black and brown people were particularly affected by the mortality statistics of this dread disease. That has been certainly acutely known as we've looked at the demographics and the statistics and have advocated for testing and for making sure that of the health and welfare, which is the primary consideration of elected officials, myself as mayor. So my background as a medical professional and having that input from my colleagues, former colleagues from the profession, and making sure how we employ those principles of health and wellness and all the social distancing and the things we need to do are preeminent among all the things that we plan. And so also affect the way we are setting up the election, the polls, the way that we make outreach to people. These are extraordinary times. And as we know that extraordinary times mean we have to make extraordinary effort. Whoever knew it was going to take 15 days that the post office is saying for people in Pontiac and elsewhere to get mail to the clerk's office for an absentee ballot. That's extraordinary. And so we've had to make an extraordinary effort to account for that. Number one, just to educate people and let them know, to be aware, to also give them alternate methods of getting their absentee ballots safely to the clerk's office so they can be counted. Such things as the clerk is extending the hours, offering more weekend hours than they ever have before. We have employed, and we're doing that as a conjoint voting election effort between the clerk's office and administration and other factors to make sure that we have a quadrant of people who are making sure that people have that information and know the accommodations that are being made to get their ballots counted. We are likewise a city that has ordered through the clerk's office ballot boxes for our absentee ballots to be put in. So after a certain date, we're trying to make sure people don't put them in the post office because they won't get to the clerk's office, as we have known from the previous election and what we are being told by the United States Postal Service. So these are all extraordinary methods we are taking. Basically, we want to assure people in this day and age in which there's cynicism and intimidation, which has taken different forms through the ages. You know, voting rights is the essence of a democracy. If people don't have accessibility to a ballot, then we don't have a democracy. So that's why this and the values in this election are extremely important. And we're using extraordinary means to make sure that, number one, people are aware and educated, people have accessibility, and that we protect the right of everybody to get their ballot in and to have it counted.
Fantastic, fantastic. Governor, a question came in for you in the chat that I had to flag for myself to ask. And apologies for asking you all the doom and gloom questions, but you know, there were some reports this morning, I think, and I think I saw something about this even a couple of days ago recently, where basically the president's campaign is supposedly talking with legislative leaders in Republican majority legislature states, in effect trying to get them to play a game with the electors, you know, regardless of the outcome of the election. And I'm wondering if you're confident that the winner of Michigan's election will receive the state's electoral votes. I know lots of people are reading lots of stories about lots of things that keep you up at night, but that's one of the things that I've seen, not just, you know, in reference to Michigan, but other states, referenced my home state previously. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
Oh, you know, I have thoughts.
I know you do. Well, I wonder if you'd share your thought. Yeah.
And you know, I will share my thoughts. Of course I do. And that was detailed in the Atlantic article that I referred to earlier. These are not the actions of an administration that feels as though they're going to win an election, undermining the Postal Service, questioning a process by which we've cast our votes for decades, the absentee ballots. rushing to put a person on the United States Supreme Court, and now this, working with Republican legislatures to undermine the vote of the people. Of course, I'm going to be concerned about it. And of course, we are strategizing around what was within our power, but I will be able to declare the victor, and I will abide by the vote of the people of this state, as has always been done, Republican or Democrat, in terms of governors prior to me. And I will work with our Attorney General and Secretary of State to fight to ensure that that happens. And we will litigate it if we have to in the Michigan courts. But I am confident that we will have a result where the electors on Michigan's behalf are electors truly beholden not to a political party, but to the people of the state.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing it. Technical question. We, in the age of absentee votes and mail-in ballots, folks are learning all about the mechanics of, how to fill out their ballot, how to turn it in. And we had a lot of conversation today about the fantastic resources that you all are providing in terms of drop boxes and the steps you need to take. A question came in about how Michigan voters can track their ballots, whether once they're, I suppose, tracking from the requesting stage, but this question is particularly about once it's mailed, there's a way to track it through the state to ensure that it was accepted. And also had a question about the process of curing a ballot, the issue of whether or not you can, check the curing process after you vote to make sure that you can get that vote submitted and counted. So you will talk about that a little bit?
I'm going to defer to the mayors. They might have a little more insight in terms of how that happens practically. I will just tell you that as a voter in Lansing, Michigan, I voted in the primary absentee. I had never done that before. I always go in person because, well, I love people. That's why I'm in this business to begin with. And I like to show up on election day and, get to see how the organization is working. But in the midst of the pandemic, I wanted to do what I'm encouraging other people to do, and that's vote absentee. But I do know that when I did that, I got a text message from my clerk's office that the ballot had been received. So I knew that it was in hand. I can't expand on beyond that, but I did want to share that with you, and I'll defer to the mayors.
Thank you.
So, in Westland, our clerk does a great job managing the office, and they have a database that you can check on. It basically tells you everybody that has been mailed an absentee ballot to, and then on a daily basis that gets updated as they come back in. So our clerk has the ability through a database that if a resident mailed in their ballot, they could actually call the clerk's office every single day to see if they were on that list. I like what the governor said, that they received a text back. I'm not sure that at the local level that we have a database that has everybody's phone numbers or emails that we could do that, at least at this point. But at the end of the day, on a daily basis here, that list of absentee ballots that were mailed out is updated as they come in each day.
Fantastic.
Yes, likewise here in Pontiac, our clerk over the last 6 months has spent a lot of time in correcting the database and making sure, as he's changed polling places, that he sent out those notifications. So people have recently received that to be assured that they know the right polling place to go to. But also, as people are encouraged to make sure they walk in the ballots to the clerk's office if they choose to do that, but also they have employed extra help through additional grant money we've gotten to make sure they have extra help in the clerk's office so they can record those as they come in, and people can call to make sure that their ballot has been obtained in the clerk's office. So those are ways they're kind of assuring people that their ballots are contained within the clerk's office and will be counted.
Fantastic. And there's another question here with Governor, since you mentioned Lansing. My high school roommate would not forgive me if I didn't take the opportunity to mention to you that he's from Lansing, and that's the reason that Michigan State is my March Madness team, and the only reason. So Josh would never forgive me if I didn't say that. But one of the things you mentioned, particularly, you mentioned this in general, but also specifically about your own daughter, who's going to be a poll worker. It's fantastic. I'm wondering, we've done a lot of work certainly on the poll worker piece, but also just in general around engaging people about the importance of participating in democracy through elections. But we all know, the importance of engaging young people. And so I know lots of states and localities and folks are doing it differently, but I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you all are seeing that you think are working to engage young people around this critical election?
Well, I think the nature of this election and the outreach that's being done is uniquely targeted to young people because we're using technology in ways that we haven't always done in elections past. My daughter is 16 and she, even though she's not old enough to vote, she can participate in the process by working at the poll. And so she's talked one of her friends into joining her, and this will be a good experience for them. I've always taken my kids to vote with me. And so my oldest child, who is a freshman at the University of Michigan, is also, I think, getting active with the college campus Democrats. And I think this is something that we're all very mindful of. We have some campuses where we didn't have kids come back. We've got others where they did. This is a challenge, certainly, for especially some of our congressional candidates who are used to having 50,000 votes on a campus that you can go in and talk to and mobilize. And so we're having to come up with new ways of doing that outreach. But I do think that one of the really important aspects to the moment that we're in is that this election's personal for everybody for a lot of different reasons, whether it's around the righteous demonstrations around race in this country, whether it is around the mismanagement of a health crisis that has taken so many loved ones from people or jobs from people, whether it is the passing of this titan of the Supreme Court and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and knowing how much is at risk right now, and sending Joe Biden to the White House and a Senate and a House that will work with him to enshrine some of these things into law in the event they don't stand in a court that has now been politicized in a way that it never had been before. So the personal nature of so much of this is something that I think is going to be a strong motivator for young people to vote, because certainly whether it's climate change or any of the issues I just listed, they will live with these policies as a result of this election longer than any of us. And so they've got a real reason. And the way we're reaching them is through technology and motivating that way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mayors, if there's anything that you wanted to add on that.
That does work as we are.
It does.
We're finding ways to reach all generations out there. One of the things that we brought in a prototype in Pontiac was an app that we originally brought in to pass out healthcare information in the pandemic, and had our City Hall workers on it to give them as a way to just check in as we make it safe, City Hall safe, not only for our workers, but also for our visitors and our residents. So we have expanded that because now we have programs that we can communicate all kinds of advice and advisories to our residents. It's called Pontiac Connect. It's now available on both the Google and the apps and the Apple stores. So we're expanding that, and we're going to use that for advisories and education and notices. We find that that is a way we can engage some of the younger generation that, as you say, Governor, is so involved in technology in a way that some of the older generation prefer other means of communicating. So we just want to make sure we're communicating with everybody, and that seemed to be a way that we've opened up some additional avenues of communication to our residents.
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Will, just on a personal note, My oldest child is he just turned 18, and he's a freshman this year at Central Michigan University, and this will be his first election. And it was kind of rewarding to bring him into City Hall and let him register to vote. And he voted in the primary, and he'll be receiving his absentee ballot here pretty soon too. So it's kind of I know the governor mentioned that she's got a new voter in the family too. So it always is interesting to start to hear these different political views across the table. So it's kind of exciting for us too.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
and Mayor Wild's looking in the mailbox every day, just like I am, waiting for that ballot. So I have an excuse to go see this child.
That's fantastic. This has been such a wonderful conversation, chock full of great information to share out to folks widely. So I hope everyone who's been on here has been taking notes feverishly, as I've been trying to on the Post-its that you can't see on the screen. Just the great information coming out of Michigan. Would love to give folks an opportunity as we prepare to wrap up to share any final thoughts that you might have.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't just simply thank everyone for their time and their interest, and encourage you if you want to somehow help the work that we need to do here in Michigan. The One Campaign is really an important part of ensuring that we get the votes out, we get them counted, and we are educating the public about how high the stakes are in this election. And so to the extent that you're interested in reaching in and helping, that would be a great way to do that. And thank you for your time. So glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one thing I'd add, looking through the participant list or the people that are participating today, there are a lot of elected officials on there. There are a lot of folks that aren't elected, but they're interested in this process. And everybody, you don't have to be the governor or a mayor to play an important role down the stretch. So if you can, everybody that's watching here today, if you can just take this message out and push it through your social networks and your professional and personal networks and your families. And, I think all of us collectively can work together to ensure a safe and successful election. And we look forward to, I think we're down to 41 days. A lot of us are looking forward to day 42. So when this will at least be behind us, but once again, thanks everybody for participating. And I was proud to be a panelist here today.
Likewise, I would like to thank the Center for American Progress, the Action Fund, for having this conversation. I think this is such an important election, while they all are important, but someone called this is with the issues that are at stake here. This election is one for the soul of America. And we don't want to be overly dramatic, but we do want to be prepared. And we do want to make sure that our population is aware and has accessible voting rights to this election. And I like to think of it as a collaboration, just the fact that we are here recognizes state and local collaboration in doing this. I also might speak to the county. In our county, they are going to be counting our absentee votes to help to give more capacity to our clerk's office. So this is, as I said, all hands on board through all levels. I thank you, Governor, for your strong stance on so many of the things. Appreciate your courage, particularly as I see the particular challenges, the way Michigan was targeted. You stood strong for principles, and we're behind you. This is not necessarily partisan, but this affects everybody. This election is very important. Elections have consequences, and we want to make sure that people have their voices heard through the ballot.
Well, thank you all. I think that's a fantastic note on which to end. I know you're all super busy, so I want to thank again Mayor Wild, Mayor Waterman, and Governor Whitmer. Excuse me, I got confused with the alliterations of the W. Governor Whitmer, for joining us today, sharing the great work that's going on in Michigan. Clearly, election administration is not happening in a vacuum, and so glad that you all are working together and turning out so many great ideas. Please stay safe, and everybody vote.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.